All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle one of the biggest questions in all of history. What really happened to the Roman Empire? How did it just collapse?
I want you to really let that sink in for a second. Imagine if a superpower, like the United States, just collapsed tomorrow. It sounds completely impossible, right? I mean, a global power just vanishing into thin air.
See, a collapse like that isn't just about a change in government. It's about everything we take for granted, just stopping. No government, no one controlling the army, no laws. Total chaos. And believe it or not, about 1,500 years ago, that exact scenario played out for what was, without a doubt, the most powerful empire the world had ever seen.
So that brings us to the big question, the one we're here to unpack. How on earth did an empire that seemed so permanent, so unbelievably powerful, just fall apart? Let's dig in and find out. Okay, so before we talk about the fall, we really need to grasp just how ridiculously dominant Rome was at its peak. I mean, we're talking about an empire that truly seemed invincible.
For over 1,000 years, Rome was the center of the world. Kicking off in 27 BC with Emperor Augustus, it just controlled, well, everything. It had the strongest army on the planet, hands down. They built roads and cities so advanced, it was like they were from the future. And their laws? We're still using ideas from them today. Seriously, Rome looked completely unstoppable.
But here's the thing, and this is probably the most important point we're going to make today. Power like that doesn't just switch off overnight, it weakens, slowly. The fall of Rome wasn't one big dramatic event. It was more like a slow, creeping disease, a decay that started from the inside and worked its way out.
So where do we see the first signs of this decay? Let's pinpoint the moment where historians believe the first real cracks started to appear. And what's so fascinating is how specific we can actually get. A whole lot of historians point to one single moment in time, the year 1880. That's when the great philosopher emperor Marcus Aurelius died. And for many, that was the real beginning of the end.
And you can see the problem right here. Before 180 AD, you had these strong, stable leaders. But after Marcus Aurelius, whoa, it was a total mess. Rome entered this long, dark period of just terrible leadership. You had corrupt emperors who only cared about their own power. Some guys would rule for just a few months before, boom, they were assassinated. That kind of instability just started to rot the entire system from the very core.
And that rot, that bad leadership, well, it didn't stay contained. It started to spiral out of control into something much bigger and way more violent. A problem that would shake the entire empire to its foundations.
This kicks off a period we now call the crisis of the 3rd century, starting around 235 AD. And it was exactly what it sounds like, about 50 years of absolute non-stop chaos. All that internal weakness, it was now out in the open for the whole world to see.
So let's break down this vicious cycle, because it's wild. Step 1. With all these weak leaders, the army saw its chance. They basically started a bidding war for the throne, installing whoever paid them the most. Step 2. To get that money to pay off the soldiers, what do? You jack up taxes, sky high, which of course absolutely crushed the average Roman citizen. And that leads to a feedback loop of misery. People suffer, they rebel, things get even more unstable, and the empire could barely hold itself together.
Things got so bad, so desperate, the one emperor decided he had to do something drastic. He made a radical decision, one he probably thought would save the empire, but as it turns out, it may have just sealed its fate. Okay, so the year is 284 AD. A new emperor, Diocletian, comes to power. He takes one look at this massive, sprawling, chaotic empire and comes to a pretty stark conclusion. This thing is just too big to govern.
So what does he do? He splits it right down the middle. 2 empires. On paper, the idea kind of makes sense, right? A smaller empire is easier to control. But here's the problem. The split was totally unequal. The Eastern Empire was rich, it was stable, it was way easier to defend. But the Western Empire, the one that included the city of Rome itself, was left poor, weak, and just wide open to attack.
And so, with the Western Empire weakened and divided, well, that's when the final blows started to land.
Let's just follow this timeline for a minute and watch how quickly things unravel. In 376 AD, you've got Germanic tribes pouring across the Danube River. Now, they weren't exactly invaders at first, more like refugees looking for safety. But Rome totally bungled the situation, and suddenly its borders just weren't secure anymore. And then, the unthinkable happened.
The year is 410 AD. In this date, this one sent a shockwave across the entire ancient world.
For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City, Rome itself, was sacked. It was attacked and looted by a tribe called the Visigoths. You can't overstate the psychological damage. I mean, if Rome could fall, was anywhere safe anymore? All confidence in the empire just evaporated.
And maybe this is the most surprising part of the whole story. The Western Roman Empire didn't end with some epic final battle. It was much quieter than that. In 476 AD, the last emperor, who was just a young boy by the way, was simply told he wasn't emperor anymore. He was removed from power. And that was it. The empire just ended. Not with a bang, but with a whimper.
So after all that, let's bring it all home. What's the big lesson here? What's the real takeaway from this incredible story of rise and fall?
The bottom line is Rome didn't fall because of any one thing. It was a perfect storm of problems. You had weak leadership, which led to the army running wild, which in turn caused the economy to completely collapse. You had an empire split in two, unable to deal with pressure from the outside, and really, it was just this long, slow cascade of bad decisions piling up one after another for centuries.
And that's the final thought I want to leave you with. Rome didn't fall in a day, it fell by the choices it made. Giants like this, they aren't brought down by one big hit from an outside enemy. They're hollowed out from the inside, weakened over hundreds of years by one bad choice after another. And that, right there, is a timeless lesson, not just about how you gain power, but about how you can lose it all.